Nationals MP and former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce says he is prepared to rule out recontesting the Nationals' leadership, but dodged questions of party room discontent. It comes amid reports of a possible leadership spill and internal criticism of party leader David Littleproud. And Nationals leader David Littleproud joins me now live. Thank you for joining us. Have you got the support of the party to continue as leader?
Yes, I do, and until someone wants to test that, I will have. That's the beauty of this thing called democracy. That's the primacy of our party room, and the fact that not everyone of the 21 like me is no earth-shattering news. In any party, there is always people who have discontent with the leader over issues. We try to work through that, and I think the leadership that I've tried to bring is one where the primacy of that party room is utmost, so that we can work through the issues where there is differences. I think that's important to create that environment because the Nationals are diverse. We have a range of different backgrounds and diversity that's been brought into one room, and so we don't always align. And so it's important that we do create that environment where that discussion can take place, and that's the sort of leadership that I want to bring, is that it won't be my call, it won't be a captain's call, it'll be the primacy of our party room. I think that's important, and it's a good thing for our democracy that we do have that. We bring that diversity of views to the room because we get better policy outcomes that way.
So are you expecting a challenge then?
No.
You're not.
Look,
you can rule it out. Are you ruling it out? You're ruling it out. You're not expecting a challenge at all to your leadership?
No, I have no expectation, as we left 2 weeks of Parliament of exposing this government for what Anthony Albanese's been able to do in 14 months is simply drive up everyone's cost of living and divide this country. We all walked away from Parliament last week having prosecuted that, I think, in a cogent way that we're now seeing the Australian people appreciate and understand the risks of this government and the alternative that Peter Dutton and I proposed to the Australian people. And I think that's starting to shine through. I think that the vast majority of my party room believe we are on the right trajectory to win government in 2025.
Is there internal dissent, though? You mentioned before not everyone's going to be happy with your leadership style, but what does that mean moving forward? Is the party unhappy with the way that it's going?
This is this thing called democracy. In any party, there'll be people in the Labor Party that aren't happy with the leadership style of Anthony Albanese. There'll be some in the Liberal Party that won't be happy with Peter Dutton, and I'm sure there's some in the Greens movement that aren't happy with Adam Bandt. That's the nature of politics for time immemorial. It's not earth-shattering news. But what you try to do as leader is bring together those diversity of ideas, because even those that don't agree with me on some policy matters do add value to our party room, and even on the matters where we don't agree. We seek to understand our party, and that's the one thing about the Nats, is we've always had this ability to be able to cross the floor and agree or disagree with one another and be able to follow through on that. And I think that makes us different. So that's hardly earth-shattering, but what you try to do as leader is to bring the diversity of those backgrounds and ideas together to be able to get a cogent policy at the back end of that. And I think over the last 14 months, I think the Nationals have been able to prove that, and prove that in spades.
There's been some reports that some of the MPs in the party have accused you of losing your temper. Have you got a problem with the way that you speak to staff?
No, look, I mean, the Parliament House is a place where it's a contest of ideas, and I don't think there's any politician that hasn't been there that has got passionate about expressing their views, and at times with the workload being tight and short, we've all get to that. And what we try to do is create the environment whereby we can have those discussions and be able to understand that they are good discussions to have around policy differences and direction. It's a healthy thing for our environment, but it obviously is a stressful place. So no one's immune from those pressures.
So you're confident, though, that you will remain leader of the party?
Well, I'm confident, yes. Of course I am.
So you've got the backing. You've got the backing of your colleagues. They're not going to. This is not going to turn into a spill. You've got the confidence to remain leader.
I do, and as Barnaby Joyce clearly articulated this morning, that there is no mood for a spill. We're simply getting on with the job of focusing on the Australian people, not on ourselves. And particularly, I'm sitting in Longreach, whereby there are a myriad of issues out here that they want us to focus on, not on ourselves. Particularly when we're in opposition, we have a pathway to victory after just 14 months in opposition. I think is a pretty big effort from Peter Dutton and I to lay the foundation stones for that in just 14 months after an election loss.
All right, let's move on now. I want to ask you about the voice to Parliament. For the first time, the no vote has overtaken the yes vote, according to the latest news poll. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, all Anthony Albanese's done in 14 months is actually push up everyone's cost of living and divide the country. He hasn't taken the Australian people into his trust. If he was going to do that, he'd put the legislation around the mechanics of the voice in Parliament. So not only the politicians, but the Australian people would be able to see exactly what the voice would look like, how it would work, the powers, the extent to which who would be elected, how much they get paid. But the fact he doesn't want to even trust the Australian people with that detail, why would they trust him? I mean, this is the first time we have seen a referendum that is really going to divide our country, and sadly on race. We've said from the start as Nationals, we took a principled position. We couldn't support a representative body, which this is, because we've had that thing called ATSIC that failed before, and we live with those consequences out here. And so what we're saying is, if this had just been about constitutional recognition, then he would have united the country. But instead, despite the pleas from both myself and Peter Dutton, he's ignored them, and he's gone through with this conflation of a voice with constitutional recognition. And I think, unfortunately, he's divided our country. And while he's doing that, he's unfortunately taking his eye off the cost of living pressures that Australians are feeling out there. It's a triple whammy. Everyone's mortgage is up, their power bills keep going up, and their food bills keep going up because of it. And so this is what we're saying to this government. You had an opportunity not to have to focus all your energy on this, but to focus on Australians' cost of living and create a unifying moment, and he's missed that opportunity. That took leadership. It'll now take courage for the Prime Minister to step back and acknowledge he's wrong and actually rework this.
What does it say then about the no campaign? Is the strategy that's been backed by the Nationals, for example, is that cutting through?
Well, I think we've been cogent in our argument, and we've kept our tone right about this, is that we haven't talked about this trying to divide our country. It's just that we took a principled position about the lived experience that we have of representing where the disadvantage is in rural and remote areas for Indigenous Australians, and that the voice won't work for that. But we've been able to cogently be able to articulate that we do support constitutional recognition in some form, but there should be a method in how we do that. And traditionally, that means we have a constitutional convention. The Prime Minister didn't even call a constitutional convention. The only convention he called, well, he didn't even call it, was that of 250 Indigenous Australians, just 250, and he's taken that as our constitutional convention. Every Australian should have a say on this and in the design of this, and he failed to even bring them into the trust on that. So he hasn't designed it properly, it's been ill-conceived, and he will not trust the Australian people with the detail. And when you've got lawyers from both sides, eminent lawyers from both sides, saying that this will be tested in the High Court, the only way for that business model to be tested, as we all know, is in court. That if you've got two opposing legal minds with differing opinions, then there's only one arbiter. In this case, it'll be the High Court. If the High Court interprets this legislation and this constitutional change not the way the Australian people intended, then there will be long-lasting, perpetual consequences for the Australian people.
David Littleproud, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.